Today the subject is Basar BeChalav, the subject of meat and milk, which is perhaps the most common halachic issue you can have in your kitchens at home. Yeah. Usually you're not going to bring non-kosher food, of course, to your house, but we all have in our houses, so most of us will have some food that is meat-based and some food that is milk-based or contains milk. And then you'll need to deal with not to mix them, to keep them separate, how to keep them separate, why to keep them separate. That's what we're going to concentrate on today. Now, before we get into this subject, is there anything from that we've discussed in Kashrut so far that is unclear, or something in the text you have read that you would like to ask about? I would be happy to try to answer now. Okay. If there isn't, then I think we can start the new subject. So it's not really new. I mean, I gave you an introduction already on Kashrut as a whole. That included, obviously, Basar BeChalav, but it's kind of new because we haven't gone so deeply into it. So the Torah says 3 times a verse that discusses Basar BeChalav. I think you all know it. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. What does it mean in English? Anybody can translate? Famous sentence.
That you should not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Exactly. Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. You should not cook a kid. A kid not means here the child of a sheep usually, and you should not cook it in its mother's milk. Now, the oral Torah, which is just as binding as the written Torah, always understood that this is just an example. Yeah, you cook the lamb in the mother's milk, but it doesn't have to be its own mother. Anything from that family, sheep, cows, you will not be allowed to cook them in their mother's milk, in any milk, actually, right? And the Chachamim just understood that this is just an example. It would be a very convenient way to do it. You've already slaughtered the calves and the mother is there, so you milk the mother and you cook them together. But really, any sort of cooking meat and milk together is forbidden from the Torah. Now, it's repeated 3 times in the Torah. That means you have 3 isurim, 3 prohibitions. Very important for you to note this down. There's an isur hana'ah, so isur achila, isur bishul, isur hana'ah. Yeah, you're not allowed to benefit from them. Let's start from the most basic. You're not allowed to cook them together. You're not allowed to eat the cooked mixture, and you're not allowed to benefit. I'm just going to get myself a drink because my throat is a bit dry. So wait a second. Sorry about that. So, 3 isurim, 3 prohibitions.
Sorry. Yeah, Rav Shmuel, I don't want to interrupt you. If anyone has any questions, we can take it at the end of the shiur. regarding the upcoming seminar. I don't want to interrupt this shiur.
Okay, thank you. So, three isurim, three prohibitions. You're not allowed to cook them together, meat and milk. You cannot eat the cooked mixture once it's cooked, and you cannot even benefit from this cooked mixture in any way. Yeah. So obviously some technical problems. It should get better. Now, it's very important you understand these points because this is something that makes Basar BeChalav quite different from your classic isur. Yeah, your classic prohibition, eating pork, eating meat that hasn't been slaughtered according to the halacha. All these prohibitions, as long as you don't eat it, you're fine. Yeah. But meat and milk, because of this isur hana'ah and isur bishul, you'll have interesting problems. For example, you're working in a non-kosher restaurant, yeah? So you will not be allowed to cook meat and milk together, regardless, even if you're not planning on eating it, it doesn't matter. Even if you're not going to eat it, but you're not allowed to cook them together because you're not allowed to cook, right? Meat and milk, you're not allowed to cook together. That would be one case. Another case of that will be cooking. Another case is hana'ah. You can't have benefit from it. That means to say that if I have a mixture of meat and milk, I cannot have any sort of benefit. I can't sell it to make money. Can't give it to my pet because I'm benefiting. If my pet gets its nourishment, I mean, that's a very direct benefit for me. So meat and milk is stricter than other areas of kashrut. Obviously, it's a chok. It's a commandment of God where we don't understand the reason for it. You know, obviously you can study if you want the mitzvot, the reason behind mitzvot. Why would Hashem have commanded such an interesting, such a stringent level of halacha to Basar BeChalav? But that's the halacha. Yael raised the hand, please.
Yeah, sorry. What if I buy a pizza that contains milk and meat for a homeless non-Jewish guy? Am I some kind of still benefiting from it because I did a tzedakah, or like how?
If you give, so give me a second. You just give. You have a mixture of meat and milk cooked together, and you just give it. You give it to this non-Jewish person, right? Is that your case?
Yeah, homeless non-Jewish person.
So I think there's still a benefit in the sense that you're giving a gift. It's going to thank you for it. It's going to be happy about it.
Okay.
So I think that was still a benefit. If you just render it ownerless and anybody can take it, I don't want it, just leave it. And then anybody can go and take it. That would be all right. Yeah, you could say, I don't want this because it's meat and milk. And then anybody can come and take it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now. So that's the system. Now, of course, one thing that's perhaps often people get confused is it seems so clear. Don't cook the kid in his mother's milk. But where does the whole lifestyle we have come from? Separate meat, forks and knives, separate milk, forks and knives, waiting in between. Very often also just simple mixing. I'm having a steak and I have a cup of milk. What's wrong about that? I'm not cooking them together. So here it's very important to understand. Deoraita, from a Torah prohibition, the only thing that's forbidden is exactly that. You take the meat and the milk and you cook them together. Everything else is Isur de Rabbanan. The Chachamim saw that if we allow you to, let's say, have a steak and have a cup of milk at the same time, you will come, it will be very easy from there to get to cooking meat and milk together. Therefore, we don't have meat and milk together in any form. Even if they haven't been cooked together, we don't serve them during the same meal. We're going to see soon about waiting. That's already a whole subject of its own. We'll get there soon. But that's the main rule. We do not mix meat and milk. We don't eat them together. But as long as you haven't cooked them together, it'll actually only be a rabbinic prohibition. Have certain halachic differences, if it's rabbinically forbidden or biblically forbidden. Of course, both of them are just as binding, as we have explained before. When the Chachamim forbid something, then if you do not listen to the Chachamim, you're breaking the Torah. The Torah says you shall not go to the left or to the right from what they say. And of course, we're not talking about Chachamim, some rabbi today. We're talking about the Sanhedrin, which sat in the Lishkat HaGazit, which sat in the temple courtyard, and who voted and decided, and that has the power of binding halacha. That's what we're talking about. So they, in their wisdom and with the authority conferred by the Torah, given to them by the Torah, they were able to take decisions. And these type of decisions here are called gzerot. Gzerot means they see that there's a certain prohibition of the Torah, which is getting weaker, or which people are not so careful about, and they put a siag, they put a fence around it to protect. Yeah? So there are two very important fences to protect us from coming to this mistake of actually cooking meat and milk together. One is that they forbade any sort of mixing meat and milk, even if you don't cook them together. Another one is that they took things which are not gedi, which are not even mammals, yeah? Birds, chicken, turkey, even that you can't mix with milk, which is very interesting because it's not at all the case of the Torah. Yeah, the case of the Torah is that you would be cooking in its mother's milk or in the milk of another cow, but then you take a chicken which doesn't even produce milk. It doesn't matter. Chachamim forbade it because it's an isur d'Rabbanan. They forbade you from mixing. So you don't mix any meat with milk. Fish is not considered meat, yeah? And therefore fish can be mixed with milk. Some people, especially in certain Sephardic communities, have a custom not to mix fish and milk, but it's not halakha in any way. It's based on the fact, if you sometimes meet some people, some Oriental Jews have this custom of not mixing fish and milk, the basis for it is that there is a sentence somewhere in the Bet Yosef, or Yosef Karo, he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, which is perhaps more well known, which is his code of Jewish law. But actually, before he wrote that, he wrote the Bet Yosef, which is much, much longer, where he explains everything, how he came to these conclusions. And there, in half a sentence, he says this idea of mixing fish with milk is unhealthy. But many people say it's a printing mistake because there's nowhere in the Talmud does it say such a thing, that fish and milk mixed together. What it does mention is fish and meat mixed together could be unhealthy. That's where comes the custom. You go to a Jewish home, you come, so they're not sure it's the halakha. It's based on the Talmud saying it's unhealthy. You'll see they serve the fish and then they take away the forks and the knives, they give you another plate, the meat. Yeah. That's based on this idea of the Talmud that fish and meat together could be unhealthy. But fish and milk, there isn't a very strong basis for it. Some people have this custom. So that is it. But just don't mix it. If somebody says to you they don't eat fish and milk together, that's a custom of certain Jews, definitely not a halakha. If some people don't mix fish and meat together, that is a halakha, but it's not based on kashrut. It's based on the Talmud's Talmud's claim that it is dangerous. And then you are mixing meat and milk together, which is a halakha of kashrut, which is based on Torah's prohibition not to cook a kid in his mother's milk. Now Giselle has a question, please.
I don't know if you would have anything else to say about it, because I'm pretty confused. Like, since fish is a living being, okay, they lay eggs, okay, but still they're a living being. So is there any explanation why then it's okay to mix fish and milk, and it's not okay then from the other ones?
Very good. So the Torah actually says, "Lo tevashel gdi b'chalev imo." Gdi is quite specific. It's like a sheep, a cow, right? So it's animals from that family. So only if you would cook a sheep or a cow in milk, then you would be doing the isur de orai. Now the Chachamim, they thought if you tell people, okay, you can't put your steak with milk, but you can mix chicken with milk. So people get confused because chicken and steak and beef, lamb, they're all meat, and people see them as meat. So they made a blanket rule for all different types of meat. We don't mix chicken with milk. We don't eat mix turkey with milk either. But that's a prohibition de Rabbanan. The Chachamim never felt a need to extend the prohibition to fish. I think because fish is by definition a very different type of dish. Most people don't. When you go to a shop now, they ask for meat. So people might see the connection between chicken and meat, but fish is a very different type of food. And I agree with you, it's a living animal. But the Chachamim did not think there was a danger if we mix fish and milk together that you will come to mix beef or lamb with milk. Okay, it's too far removed from the original prohibition. Therefore, the Chachamim did not feel a need to create such a fence around it. Okay, so Vinsky is asking, is mixing chicken and milk much late, like in Middle Ages? Absolutely not. It's not from the Middle Ages. It's from the time when there was still I don't know if it's a Sanhedrin sitting, either just before the destruction of the temple, or just after the destruction of the temple. Either way, it is at least 2,000 years old. Okay, and it is something that the Beit Din we still had, the Sanhedrin decided. It's not something. You should know in Halakha nowadays, at least for the last 1,500 years, we haven't had the real smicha. Yeah, so that means Miras Miram is Moshe put his hands on Yeshua and Yeshua to the next, and this, if you want the chain of ordination of real Dayanim and Rabbanim, it continued until the temple, maybe the second temple, perhaps sometime afterwards. They had the authority to make a real Isur de Rabbanan or Mitzvah de Rabbanan. And their laws will be just as binding as the law of the Torah, because Torah said you shall go to the place, you shall go to Jerusalem, to the temple, and there'll be a court there, and you'll listen to what they say. That's written in the Torah. But no rabbi today has that authority, that this chain of smicha was broken. Even nowadays, we hear somebody has smicha. But I have smicha. It's not really smicha. I have a certificate. I'm a rabbi that says that you can trust my expertise in certain areas of halacha. But that's not the real smicha, which gave you the authority to decide at the level of the Torah, to the extent that when what you say, you have to listen, just have to listen to the Torah. The power to make these gzerot and takanot. So all these decisions are from the time there was still this authority. Yeah, and then from the Middle Ages, let's say, does not have the same level of authority. Some that came from before the Talmud, even, like what we're discussing here now, mixing chicken, mixing fowl with milk. Okay. So wait a second. Now, what about nowadays? Of course, there is a whole industry of fake meat and fake milk. Yeah, you have some that looks like meat, but it's not really meat. It's a vegetarian option. Or you have sometimes, something much more common, you have something that looks like milk, but it's not really milk. You have oat milk, you have soy milk, you have all these things. So, of course, you're allowed to mix those things with meat or with milk. Yeah? It's not real, and it's very, very common. There is something that discussed in halakha called marit ha'ayin. Marit Ayin means something that looks like a prohibition. So you're not just like you know how to break the Torah, but how you also don't want to do things which look like you're breaking the Torah, things which look suspicious. A Jew should never try to arouse suspicion towards himself. It says in the Torah, "V'yitem nekim Hashem Israel," has to be clean in front of Hashem. You have to be clean in front of the Jewish people. You shouldn't do things which look suspicious. Shouldn't become the center of a. You shouldn't. Should be ashamed of sin to the extent that you shouldn't even want people to think that you're sinning. So there's actually a big discussion when soy milk first came, or when margarine first came, for example. People would, if they had serving meat, and then people would have bread and margarine, they would put the margarine always in the box, not in like the people see, it's margarine, it's without milk. Yeah? A lot of people think it's butter, it's milk. People would bring the soy milk bottle to the table. We can see it's soy milk. It's not, because you're not meant to do anything that looks like you're doing it. Nowadays, it's not such a problem because it's so common, and everybody has soy milk, and everybody has soy ice cream. So nobody is going to be surprised. If you have a meaty meal, even the most religious family, you eat meat, and after that they bring ice cream. Nobody's surprised. It's so common that ice cream should be made from plants nowadays that it's not a problem of Marit Ayin anymore. But that's it. Basically, you don't mix meat and milk. Now, a case, what if you are eating something with meat and somebody else is eating something with milk? Yeah. You could be at home. One of you wants to have a cheese sandwich. Somebody else is eating the leftovers from the Shabbat meal, which have meat. You could be together sitting with a colleague. That's what's practical. You're in the, you're sitting around the table with other people, and you eating your lunch, he's eating their lunch. So what's the halacha? So it depends. First of all, are you two in a relationship where you will feel comfortable to ask to take some food from each other? Yeah, your close friends, your family members, then you have a problem. If you are not that comfortable with each other, and therefore, yeah, you're like people who barely know each other, so then there's no problem at all, because I eat my food, you eat your food. There's no, it wouldn't cross my mind to take from you. So even if you're eating milky food, and I'm eating meaty food, we don't have a connection to each other. If we're in a situation where I'm eating, where it's likely that we might take from each other, we're friends, brothers, family, whatever it is. So then you have to do a heker. You have to put something to separate between you and me. Yeah, to remind me, oh yeah, he's eating meat, I'm eating milk, we cannot mix. I can't take from his food, he can't take from my food. Different ways of making heker. You could put an object on the table that you don't usually have on the table. That will remind you. What's very common also, let's say he's got a tablecloth. So either you put a little tablecloth for yourself, or you take off the tablecloth from your part. So he's eating on the tablecloth, you're eating on the table. So these little things, they'll remind you that you have to be careful not to take from each other. Keep this in mind, because these halachot of hekel, Basar BeChalav, of a reminder, you'll have very, very similar halachot when you learn about Tarat Mishpacha, the laws of family purity between a husband and a wife. When the wife is nida, and they have to keep separation, they'll have very similar laws of hekel where they're eating together. Very, very, very similar. So you have it here in Basar BeChalav, you have it there in the laws of Tarat Mishpacha. Then the question everybody likes to talk about here already, we had a discussion. What about waiting? I've eaten meat, I want to eat milk later. I've eaten milk, I want to eat meat later. What is the halacha? So let's start with a simpler one. If I have eaten milky food, I've had cheese, or I have a drink of milk. Usually the halacha is, all I need to check is that my hands are clean, wash my hands, and wash my mouth, have a drink of water, gargle out of the mouth, and put some food like bread or a cracker or something in my mouth that will, clean it and take away any piece of cheese or milk that might be there. Those two things. Wash your hands, drink of water, eat something parve, something that's not meat or milk, and something a bit starchy like bread or crackers. All you need to do, and then you can straight away eat meat. That's the normal rule. There's one exception. Hard cheeses. It's brought down that the hard cheese, you should wait. We're going to soon speak about how long you wait, because I know this is but basically, there are those who say by hard cheeses, you'll have to wait the same amount of time before you eat meat as you wait for meat to melt. Again, I'll talk about 6 hours because that's the basic custom, but of course we'll speak there are other things as well. If you've had a glass of milk, you've had a yogurt, you've had cream cheese, you've had a soft cheese, whatever it is, you had a bowl of cornflakes, all you need to do is wash your hands, have a drink of water, have a cracker or something parve, and then you're done. Then you can eat meat immediately. If you've had a hard cheese, you'll have to wait 6 hours or whatever else you wait before you have meat. The reason being, this is brought down, Maharami Rothenburg mentions about 1,000 years ago, this idea that it's 700 years ago, that once he ate cheese and then he wanted to eat meat and he noticed there was cheese stuck to his teeth. So he said this, so that's where it comes from, this idea that for a hard cheese, they have the same problems as with meat. Usually milk is very soft, it gets digested quickly and so on, but hard cheeses could be a problem. Now, the truth is it's very hard to define what is a hard cheese, because the argument that's brought in the poskim is it's a cheese that's aged for 6 months. Yeah, so very few cheese. So it's a very, very, very like hard, very strong tasting cheese. Not so many cheeses are like that. Now, some people say that nowadays the aging process is different from what it used to be. So you have different customs. There are some rabbis who really say like none of the cheeses almost today are hard, like only some very, very expensive, nice cheese that really is kept for 6 months. Some are stricter. I don't think there's so much reason to be very strict because the whole thing is not mentioned in the Talmud. It's not in the it's a stringency of the Maharami Rothenburg. So you should try. If you know this is a really strong, hard cheese that's aged for 6 months, then you should wait your 6 hours before having meat. But otherwise, you can assume it's still considered like a soft cheese. Normal rule with milk products is you eat it, wash your mouths, eat a cracker, and wash your hands. Make sure that everything is clean, of course. The glass, whatever you have on the table is clean. It's not going to be any milk that's going to fall into the meat. Otherwise, from milk, you jump to meat, no problem. Very practical, by the way. Very soon is coming Shavuot in a few weeks. That's a very, very practical thing because Shavuot, on the one hand, it's a Chag, it's a Yom Tov. On Chag is a mitzvah to eat meat if you enjoy it. Yeah, I know there's many of you, there's some vegetarians in our group. You never have to eat meat in Judaism, but it's a mitzvah if you enjoy it to eat the food you enjoy. Most people, usually meat is a nice way to show that this is a special, nice meal. So Shavuot is a Chag, so you want to have meat. There's also a very, very strong custom to have milk-based milk products on Shavuot. I'm not going to go into details why. You can study it yourself. Lots of different theories as why. But there's a strong custom of having milk products on Shavuot. So you have a bit of a challenge. How do you have meat and milk? Because you're not allowed to mix them. So you can have, one option is to have some, let's say the dinner and the supper would be with milk and the lunch would be with meat. Another way of doing it is to have this, have milk hors d'oeuvre, take away, change the tablecloth, take away all the milky stuff, wash your mouth, have a cracker, and then you can have meat, because you don't have to wait from milk to meat. You don't have to wait from meat to milk. Yes, Eazaz, Daniel and Vakasha.
Yes. I have a question that is Edam Emmental cheese or hard cheese? And if they don't have any forbidden ingredients there, are they needed to kosher level?
Okay, so now you're asking a different question, not about mixing meat and milk. You're asking a question about the kashrut of cheese. Yeah. So it's not really our subject today, but I'll answer. It's a practical halacha. Any hard cheese, cheeses except for cream cheese and so on, but usually cheese needs a hashgacha. It needs to have a kosher stamp. Yeah. The reason for that is Chamim, they forbade non-Jewish cheese for the reason, a different explanation, but the main reason is because the normal way how they make cheese usually is with the rennet. They take something from the cow's stomach to harden, to ferment the cheese, the rennet. Even if you know this cheese they didn't, but it doesn't matter because the Chaim already made a gzera on all the cheeses that are not supervised. Therefore, in cheese, hard cheeses, you have to buy them with a kosher stamp. We have here in Finland, for example, we bring in some cheese from Holland and so on. Soft cheeses, many people are lenient, cream cheese, but hard cheese should have a kosher stamp, otherwise it is not kasher. But that will come in the next few shiurim. You're going to have givinat akum, chalav akum, stam yenam. These are all in the special rabbinic prohibitions. Okay?
Thank you.
Good. Now, so I spoke about if you eat milk, then you want to eat meat. Now let's go to the other way around, more interesting. I've had meat, or chicken, or turkey, lamb, doesn't matter. Any product that contains meat. Now, what should I do? So really, the Talmud tells us a very interesting line. It says, Ma'avarei de Ravina said, I am not as good as my father. My father waited 24 hours after meat before he had milk. I only wait from one meal to the next. That's what it says in the Talmud. Now, what does it mean to wait from one meal to from a meal to a meal? What does it mean from a meal to a meal? So the Rambam, Maimonides, he interprets it to mean very literally the time from meal to meal. So usually people have lunch around 12 o'clock. They have supper around 6 o'clock. That was the regular way of eating, at least in times of the Talmud. And many people still nowadays. So it's about 6 hours. So you wait 6 hours. After you've had meat, before you have milk, you wait 6 hours. That's the opinion of the Rambam. And that was what was accepted in the Sephardi communities, absolutely. Now, Tosafot, who were the French, the great yeshivot of France, starting with Rashi and his students, they understood it a bit different. They understood that what Ma'avarei de Ravina and Talmud meant, wait from meal to meal, it meant to say you should not have meat and milk together in the same meal. But if you've finished your meal of meat, make birkat hamazon. You're done. Now you can have milk. And therefore, the Remar, Moshe Isserles, 500 years ago, when he has his glosses on the Shulchan Aruch to say what are the customs of the Ashkenazim, he says 1 hour. 1 hour is the custom. After you've had meat, you wait an hour and then you can have milk. Now, Lemaaseh, even the Ashkenazi world, many opinions say that it's not so good to follow this opinion of Tosafot, that can't just wait 1 hour. And it seems to be that this custom, waiting only 1 hour, sort of died out. There's still one community that very strongly holds on to this. After meat, they wait an hour and then they have milk. That's the community in Holland. Jews in Holland, they still keep this custom, 1 hour after meat before having milk. But most of the Ashkenazim have sort of followed the same custom as Sfaradim, and the most common custom is 6 hours. You've had meat, you wait 6 hours before you have milk. There are some communities, especially Jews from German origin, have the custom of 3 hours. Not so clear what the source for it is, but such a custom does exist. So I would say, unless, I don't know, somebody told me there might be a different custom in Denmark, but I would say if there's a specific custom in your community that you want to be part of, then you know this is your community, you're going to be part of that community, or you have the custom in your family, you should follow the custom of your family, of course. If there's nothing specific and you're learning the halachot from scratch, I would say 6 hours makes sense, because that is definitely the most common in most Orthodox Jewish communities in the world. That is very, very much accepted custom. There are certain communities where it's different. I lived in the UK for a while, and there are a lot of Jews come from Germany, and there actually 3 hours is very common. But otherwise, I would say 6 hours is very, very, very widespread. The reason for this waiting, whatever you wait, what is the reason? The reason is because, first of all, meat can get stuck into your teeth. And there's also an idea that the taste, meat has a strong taste and it stays in your mouth for a long time. These are all dinim of Chachamim. Remember, from the Torah, the prohibition was to cook the meat and the milk together. Chachamim did not want you to mix them together. The Chachamim also didn't want you even to be in a situation where they're too close to each other. So that's why we have this waiting after meat before milk. Milk is a lot lighter. It's much easier to move from milk to meat. From meat to milk, you have to wait. That is concerning the issue of waiting. Now, if a mistake happens, something milky falls onto something meaty, cheese and meat touch each other. So first thing, don't panic. It doesn't always mean that everything is lost. You should arrange your house in a way that it doesn't happen. Yeah, but it doesn't always mean everything is lost. Very often when it's cold, it's not a problem. It depends, but even it can depend. If it's spicy, if it's salty, always ask the rabbi if a mixture happens. But it's not always that you have to put it in the bin. There are many situations where it will actually be okay, and you can find a solution to still eat. Now, something very, very important to understand. This applies to meat and milk, but applies to kashrut in general. There's something called ta'am ke'ikar. The taste is like the thing itself. What does that mean? If I cook something non-kosher in a pot, the pot becomes a non-kosher pot. There's a way to make it kasher, called kashering, and you'll have a shiur about that later. But till that day happens, it's that pot or saucepan is not kasher, and you cannot use that to cook kosher. The same thing with meat and milk. If I've cooked meat in a pot, in a saucepan, in a frying pan, then that saucepan or frying pan becomes a meaty saucepan or frying pan. I cannot cook anything milky in it anymore. That's why it's very, very important that in your house you have separate dishes for meat and for milk, separate frying pan, separate saucepan, separate forks and knives, all of them separate. Some things for meat, some things for milk. You should have different areas where you put your hot pots, the counters. This is where you put the meat, this is where you put down the milk. Because if hot meat soup spills onto the one place, and then you put their milky pot, you have a problem. The moment there's hot contact, you're in big trouble. We try to avoid even cold contact, because it can also say problems. When a vessel has absorbed something hot, you're in big trouble because the pot or the pan or the fork or the knife, it will absorb in itself the taste, and then it will become a meaty or a milky fork or knife. And the only way to change it would be to kasher it. Go to the hagala, libun, that's a complicated thing, which you're going to learn. But the way you should arrange your house, meaty dishes, milky dishes. Yes. If you made a mistake, you took by accident, you took the pot. First of all, you should mark them well, because if you don't mark them well, you're gonna make mistakes. You should mark them. They should look different. You know, very often, like for example, we get in the house, they're different styles of hooks and knives. It should be something you can recognize them, because otherwise, it's very, very likely you're gonna make a mistake. If you made already a mistake, don't panic. There are many, many situations where it'll be okay. Ask the rabbi, call the rabbi. This is what happened, the exact details, and we'll see. There are many situations where bediavad will still be able to eat the food, but you have to find out what you have to do. Sometimes you have to kasher the vessel, sometimes you don't have to kasher the vessel. Some things like China, for instance, if something like China plate, might be a situation where you're not allowed to, you cannot kasher China, you cannot kasher. So if it's absorbed the wrong type of food, it had meaty and milky together in the plate, or different times, it could even be a case you just have to put in the bin or throw away the plate. So but there are cases where not. So you have to always ask a rabbi if such a situation happens where you've made a mistake in the kitchen. Then you have household appliances, ovens, dishwashers. So what you should do is like this. Of course, if you cook meat in the oven, the taste of the meat is going to go everywhere. Most of the food we eat, with the heat, it will go everywhere. So if you cook meat in your oven, the oven is a meat oven. You're not going to be able to put milk in it. Unless one thing you could do it, if you want to put something milky in it, you wrap it from all the sides with foil. Then it cannot have contact with anything that's in the oven. That would be your option if you want to put something milky in the oven. So you should determine what is your main use. You mainly cook meat in your house, you mainly cook milk in your house. You choose that, and then your oven should be that style. If it comes that happens a situation where you have to use the opposite, so you can cover it from all the sides. If comes a situation, in our house, for example, the oven is meat. Don't often cook milk, but maybe once a year it can happen. Because often before Shavuot, for example, we have a situation you want to make, cheesecake, or someone wants to make pizza. So at that specific moment, you want to make it kasher. There's a way to do it. I'm not really teaching those of kashering now. You learn it later, but basically you clean the whole oven, you turn it on for an hour. There is a way to do it, but that's the best way to deal with your kitchen at home. Decide what's more common for you, meat or milk. Use it for that. If a specific case happens, today you need to cook milk and you cannot cover it from all the sides, let's say it's baking or something, then you could do kashering for that moment, make it, but that will be a specific case, and we'll deal with that specific case at the time it comes. Please, Ms. Larsson. Bakasha.
Yeah, I'm asking, if I'm using a plastic bag for staking a steak and in the oven, do I need to kasher the oven afterwards?
If the meat is completely covered by a plastic bag, then you probably wouldn't. But I don't really know what your situation is. Is there? It's a whole dish with different things. It's only a bag in a.
You put the chicken, for instance, in the bag, and you make it close, and then put it in the oven, and then it will be there for 1 hour or less.
So I don't.
It's very not so dry.
But I wonder, because I think if it's a roasting bag, I think it's made to like bring out the taste. No, I don't really know, because for example,
to keep it in the bag.
Keep it in the bag.
Mm-hmm.
If it blocks out completely and nothing can come out through the bag, say,
it's
so
completely blocked.
So then I think you're right. Nothing, then it would be fine. Yeah, then it would not make the whole oven meaty.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have 2 bags or something, just to, because if one of them tears a bit, then you have 1 bag inside a bag. Usually, we always put 2 covers in this situation. This way, you play it safe.
Okay.
But
they're very strong bags, anyhow.
Okay. Then you have dishwashers. Again, there are different opinions. Some people say that dishwashers are. I'm trying to think, should we start with dishwashers? Let's start with the sink. Sink is maybe simpler, and then we move on to dishwashers. So the sink, what are the problems with the sink? The ideal is if you have 2 sinks. If you go to a Jewish house, you go to Israel, you go to places with lots of Jews, you only see 2 sinks. Then you have no problems. 1 sink is for the meat, 1 sink is for the milky dishes. Shalom al Israel, as they say. And for most of us here in Scandinavia, it's not so practical. We actually do. We have 2 sinks next to each other, which is pretty good. You should be careful if you do that, not to let it splash from one to another, especially if they're low. But that's a wonderful thing if you have 2 sinks. If you only have 1 sink, then you have a bit of a problem, because obviously you're going to wash it with hot water. That's how you wash dishes. So if there's meat dishes there, and after that you put milk dishes, so the walls of the sink have got the taste of the wrong dishes. Sometimes the particles of food stay there as well. So you should think, what's the more common thing you wash? What's the more common dishes that you wash? And use it for that. And then when you want to use the other one, one thing you could do is for example, get some sort of bowl and wash it in that, or you can even put an insert the bowl in and make a little hole at the bottom where the drain is, and then use that bowl so it doesn't these vessels of the wrong style don't get in touch with the walls of the sink. That's what you would do. That's hand washing. So what about dishwasher? So dishwasher, there's different opinions and it also depends a lot on how the dishwasher works. Technically, when you put vessel in the dishwasher, what happens? There's hot water comes mixed with soap immediately, and it washes off everything. So soap is something that takes away that ruins everything. It takes away the good tastes because of any food. Now the halacha is when something has a bad taste, it's not a problem of kashrut anymore because it's not food. So there's a question: can you put, if you wash meaty dishes, everything gets washed, and when it gets washed, it's all full of soap, very strong. This tablet that they put in the dish was very strong. So it's not really considered that the dishwasher ever absorbed meat in the first place. So maybe when you put later milky dishes, it's not a problem because there is no contact. There's nothing, anything that was made, any taste of meat that came was full of soap. It wasn't edible. Some people will say that. Some people will say that it is a problem because that depends very much. Sometimes the first hot water comes without any soap mixed in it before the first wash, and then at that point already, so the dishwasher becomes meaty or milky. And the next time you put in it is milky dishes. Last time it was meaty dishes. Could be a problem. Also, the filter often collects a lot of pieces of food. So if the water goes through that, it would be a problem. So some people say one thing you could do is you could do the meaty dishes as then let it go empty and it washes itself through, and that's with hot water. That's like kashering. And you put it again with milky dishes. So then it'll be like one empty dishwashing in between. It gets quite tricky. What I would recommend, at least what we do in our home, the easiest thing is decide again, what do you need? What do you have more in your house? What is the main usage? Do you have a lot of meat? Do you have a lot of milk? And use a dishwasher for that. And then sometimes when you need to use the other one, wash those by hand. So that's what we found quite simple. In our house, we rarely have cooked hot milk or whole meal based on cheese and milk. So you don't have so much milky dishes. So, when we have a milky stuff, we wash them with hand. And most of the time, either we're eating meat or we're eating paref, which is not meat or milk. So then you just put them in the dishwasher and that's it. Sometimes you have a bit of milk, some cornflakes, whatever, so we can wash those by hand. It's not a problem. Again, everybody arranges it the way that it works for their house. I'm just trying to explain here the halachic points. When it's cold contact, there is no problem, right? So if you have in the same fridge, you can have meat and milk. You don't need to have two separate fridges, but you should make sure that things are closed in a way that nothing meaty drops into anything milky, nothing milky drops into anything meaty, right? They shouldn't mix. As long as they don't mix, they can be next to each other. That's not a problem. The problem is the ovens, the dishwashers, the counters. This is where the problems come, because that's where they have hot contact. Once you have hot contact, it's not just about if there's a particle of food like in steam. Even if you can't see anything, but the vessels and the tables and everything will become meaty or milky. Okay. One more area that's very important is cutting vegetables. Like I said, normally if it's cold, it's not a problem, right? So I could, let's give you an example. I could take a cucumber, cut it with a knife that I've cut meat with in the past. The knife is clean. I cut a cucumber, and then I have it with my cheese. Perfectly fine, no problem at all. Everything is clean. There's no hot contact. However, there's a special halacha called davar charif, something which is a very sharp, spicy taste. That is considered like heat. It's got the power to pull out the taste. If I take what's the most classic case is a raw onion. Onions will have a very sharp taste, or a raw radish. So that halacha is like this: is I take a meaty knife I usually use for meat, I cut a raw onion with it. Now this onion becomes a meaty onion, even if the knife was completely clean. It's been in the dishwasher, I don't care. Completely clean. It's even been a long time since I last used it for meat. But I know in the past it's been used for meat, and I took it from the meaty drawer. I cut an onion with it. The onion is meaty, and I'm not allowed to mix this onion with anything milky. Therefore, it's very important for you to have a parev knife, a vegetable knife which is not used for meat or for milk. Because otherwise, you're going to end up in big problems when you try to, because you're going to cut an onion with the wrong thing, and you're going to want to mix it with it. It's very important to have a parev knife. Same thing, I suppose, if you wanted to eat vegetables, rice, potatoes, if you cook them in a meaty pot, you should eat them with meat. If you cook them in a milky pot, you should eat them with milk. If a difficult situation happens, you cooked it in a meaty pot, but now you want to eat it with milk, then you should ask your rabbi. It's quite a complicated area of halacha called nat bar nat. There are different customs, Faradim, Ashkenazim. It's a sugya of its own. If such a situation happens, but lechatchila, before the fact, you should think, what are you planning on doing with these potatoes or with this rice or with this pasta or with these vegetables? Are you planning on eating them with meat? Or are you planning on eating them with milk? And based on that, you should take your decision which pot you cook it in. Or you can have a parev pot. If you really care about this, you cook something in a parev pot, and then you can mix it with meat or with milk. The last subject of meat and milk is something people really don't know. It's very, very unknown, but I think it's very important. There's a special halacha that you're not meant to bake bread, which is meat that contains meat or it contains milk. Even if you just want to eat, that means I want to eat the bread alone without any meat. I just want to have a piece of bread, but I'm gonna bake into the bread milk. Or I want to add animal fat, meat fat to my bread in the baking. Both of these things are forbidden. Why? Because it looks like bread. Anybody who looks at it, it's a piece of bread. He's not going to even cross his mind there's meat or milk in it. And cut himself a slice of this milky bread and mix it with meat. It's not going to think. However, there are two ways out of this problem. One way out is if you make a very small amount that you're going to eat in one go. There's no problem because you bake it. You bake this milky bread and you eat it. There's no problem. The problem is when you make a big loaf. So you know that it's got milk in it. So you eat, you're very careful. But you leave it this big loaf, you cut yourself a slice and you go. Somebody else doesn't know. You think it looks like bread. He's going to cut himself a piece of the bread and mix it with meat. So if you make a small amount, it's okay. Another case which is okay is if you make it clearly different. And it's obvious to everybody this is not a regular piece of bread. This is not a regular loaf of bread. You may give it a different shape, a different size. Something has to make it clear to everybody this is not a normal loaf of bread. Because the assumption that people have is bread is paramount. Right? If I see bread, it's not going to cross my mind there's meat or milk in it. Right? So therefore the Chachamim forbade baking bread with meat or milk inside it unless there is a clear sign that makes it very clear to everybody this is not regular parva bread. Or another option is that it's a small amount that you're going to eat in one go. And then you're not going to have a problem because you know what it's meant for. It's milky or meaty and you eat it and it's gone. Okay, so I think that covers the main points of the laws of meat and milk. Are there any questions?
Rav Shmuel, I had a comment or a question. First of all, a huge yashar koach for getting it across. This is years of learning and to be able to put it in a concise manner. I think in the Scandinavian countries, we're seeing more and more products which look like milk and are similar to milk. And then there's a question of marit ayin. In other words, if I'm cooking, for example, chicken in coconut milk, or I'm making a lasagna with parve vegan cheese on it, or vice versa, I'm having cheese and fake meat, farsh, or like this vegan meat. So I think that we're having more and more questions that we're dealing with in terms of what is and what is not, what are people used to and would not assume that it's milk and meat, and what would be problematic, because in the past anything that even looked similar we kept away from, but today I think there's more and more that would be possible because it's a norm in society. Maybe I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to me at least, I think that the idea of vegan meat is a bit of a newer idea. I think the idea of like vegan milk is already it's been around for so long. I remember soy milk from my childhood, and today there is like 7 options, like almond milk, rice milk. So I think nobody today is going to think if I'm having a glass of something that looks like milk together with my steak, I don't think anybody's going to think that I'm not a religious Jew and I'm drinking milk with meat. But I think the other way around is perhaps is still a bit of a new phenomenon. I've seen like advertisement for this fake meat. There's been around for a while already, tofu, different things of meat replacement, which looks like minced meat. but I think it's becoming bigger and newer, and I wonder where do you draw the line? If it's becoming, in the past also, I feel like it was a way to tell, like soy milk, it looks a bit more yellow usually, but nowadays a lot of these things getting better and better. So I think it might be a question, if everything looks like meat and it tastes, as in it's you could fool an expert, so to say, then I think there will be a problem of Marit Ein, and perhaps you would need to maybe put the box on the table, or make a sign on it, or I don't know, what would you do? Put a little flag on it or something to make it clear. But I think it's a really good point. I see somebody wrote here an interesting message. So I found something vegan with a hechsher which said kosher DE. Should that then still be treated like dairy, though it does not contain dairy itself? Right. So if it's made with dairy equipment, so like we explained, if you cook something in a milky pot, it's milky, and you're not allowed to mix it with meat. However, I just had a talk about this with some rabbis. It's a bit with some other rabbis in Europe, where they'll talk. It's quite misleading, this, because the truth is that, let's say, I know, for example, the Ben and Jerry ice creams, they say DE on them, dairy equipment. So people get scared. Well, what does it mean? I'm not allowed to have it after my meat? Well, it's not really such a problem, because you're not going to pour the ice cream on top of your meat, right? So it seems to be that where they made this ice cream, they've used the same utensil, the same equipment as the milk, the milky ice cream. So they cannot promise that there's not some residue somewhere of milk. Even that probably not, because it's vegan, but maybe they've used the same thing, so they could be hot contact and the taste of the milk. But that's very, very far-fetched. So perhaps you shouldn't pour that ice cream on your meat, but nobody's going to do that anyway. But I don't think there's a requirement after you've eaten meat to wait 6 hours to have a vegan ice cream that's been made with dairy equipment. Because as we remember, the only thing that's really forbidden from the Torah is cooking meat and milk together. The Chachamim forbade mixing meat together, because it might get you to cooking meat and milk together. And then they forbade waiting 6 hours, or whatever you wait, 1 hour, 6 hours, 3 hours from meat to milk. But here you're eating meat, and 6 hours, and you're gonna straight after eat something that perhaps might have tiny residue of milk somewhere. I think that's not necessary. You can definitely have that ice cream after the meat, but you shouldn't pour something that says dairy equipment. You shouldn't actually actively perhaps mix it with the milk itself.
Rav Shmuel, I think it's quite new, and I understand it's confusing, but in the past, for example, all of the chocolate bars in Israel, even if they were parve, they would say chalavi on them for this reason, because they would say that they were dairy, even though they weren't, because there was equipment. So then in the last years, they're trying to make it easier and say, well, you can, I think the idea of saying dairy equipment is like you're saying, that you could have it as a dessert. You could have the chocolate immediately after a meat meal. Not too long ago, and still many of the chocolates that are really parve, you look in the ingredients, they have no milk in them. They will say on them that they are chalavi, that they are milchik, and the reason is because they don't want you to eat it with meat. So the kosher DE for sure is the way of telling you that you can have it right after the as a dessert, or right after the meal, maybe not together inside the meal itself.
Thank you.
So I'm looking forward to seeing most of you. Everyone here, most of the people here have registered. So it's fantastic, and we'll see you on Shabbat, and on Sunday we'll meet Rav Shmuel as well, and Rav Yoav is coming, and Rav Yair, Rav Natan, and we'll all be in Copenhagen. So we're really looking forward to a fantastic Shabbat. For those of you who cannot make it, as I wrote in the chat, we'll be online next week at 11 o'clock Copenhagen time. And those of you who cannot join physically will be able to at least join us there. So thank you, Rav Shmuel, Shavua Tov, and looking forward.
Shavua Tov.
תודה רבה ושבוע טוב.
תודה רבה, שבוע טוב.
Shavuot tov.
Thank you.